It's the Digital Babble with your host, Flipper. Colourful commentary on your photography. Seen on fingerlakes1.com.
Hey everybody, it's me Flipper on the Digital Babble. This week we're going to be talking about ISO. That's basically your film or center speed setting on your camera. And there's a lot of things that this can do and help work your photos, help get better photos, sometimes worse photos. So ISO is one of those settings where a touch goes a long way versus a little bit goes a long way, I guess. Yeah, a little bit goes a long way versus too much can really ruin a good thing. ISO is a great setting to learn and understand. Basically gives you the sensitivity option for your sensor or film. So when we were talking in the old days, a little history, in the film days, we talked about film speed. Film speed is a basically designated as a 100, a 200, 400, and it always went up and it always doubled. The numbers always doubled. So 100 to 200 was twice as fast film speed. The same rule applies for sensor speed. Sensor speed is done in the same fashion. So you would start at 100, which would be a slow speed, and every time you doubled the number, it would go up to 200, 400, 800, 1600, 3200, and so on up past that. The big thing about getting a little bit higher film speed or sensor speed was that you could change your settings, your other settings such as your aperture or your shutter, in order to compensate to try to get the shot that you're trying to, try to capture the scene the way you want to capture the scene. Good point in that is like saying if you're at a sporting event and you're trying to capture that person running with the football down the other end of the stadium, and they're running and running and running and running and running, and you're taking shots at 100 ISO, and the lighting's just not good enough or whatever. The shutter speed might be too slow, and the person running the ball might look blurred. So a way to compensate for that and to bring the shutter speed up a little bit is to change the ISO setting. Go from 100 to 200 or 100 to 400. Every time you double the number in ISO, you're allowing or making the sensor twice as sensitive to light. What that basically means is that whatever light you have right now will be twice as effective when you go to take that picture. So saying if you're working with a shutter speed of 1/30th of a second, you take your ISO and go from 100 to 200, you will then see that the shutter speed will go from 1/30th to 1/60th. One full stop of light. If you've remembered when we've talked in the past about the different settings, we have ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. It's the triad for exposure on any camera. It doesn't matter whether it's an iPad or one of these guys. I brought my small Canon G12 with me today, just so I had it, so I could show you a couple of settings on the camera, stuff to look for. But on digital, all it's doing is just changing a setting, adding more voltage or making the photo sensor a little more sensitive to light. So it's all done, digitally. Back in the film days, you would actually have to pull the film out and put a new roll of film in order to get a different speed of film. The one thing, though, back in the film days, which was kind of neat, you could have a 200 speed film, tell the camera to run it as 400 speed film, and that was called pushing the film. Can't really do that with sensors, but it's just so easy to change ISO speed on a camera, on a digital camera nowadays. It really doesn't make much sense to really push anything, and if you want to push something, you push it in Photoshop. Take it into Photoshop, crank up some, the lightness, the darkness, the contrast, or whatever. So a lot of things have become digital. So I'm going to talk from this point forward more about the digital aspects of it than the film. But if you are shooting film or still shooting film, one of the things that you're going to want to remember is that film speed. The higher the film speed, the more grain there is, because each particle of emulsification in the film has to be able to be that sensitive to the light in order to get the picture at that speed. So that's how they rate those things. The same thing really applies in the digital realm. They really did a great job of, just mimicking the whole film experience. Getting right into the whole. Okay, ISO 100 works like this, and ISO 200 works like that, and ISO 400 works like this. So they've really done a great job of mimicking the whole film era, the whole film, just mimicking film, really. They're not quite there yet. I mean, everybody says, well, I can tell a digital photo from a real photo. Well, I suppose you can. I mean, it depends on how you get a print of it and so on and so forth. But, they've gotten so well where, ISO 100 is just so hard to tell anymore if it's digital or not digital. ISO 200 and 400 are still pretty much really, really difficult to tell whether it was a digital photo or not a digital photo. And a lot of times you could tell, just from the camera that you're shooting with, like this point and shoot. This is a really nice, the Canon G12. They're up to a G15. This is a great little point and shoot. Can take professional grade photos. Has a lot of different knobs and settings where it allows you to control your photo, and you get to set those things, not the camera per se. So I'm going to hold this up. I just got to find it here. So there's two knobs. Let's see if I can get it and hold it still. As you can see right here, there's two knobs. One is for my scene selection. The other one is for the ISO. And that's what we're going to talk about, is changing that setting to start getting pictures or working your photos in order to get the shot that you're looking for. So let's keep that in mind as we go forward, is that all we're going to focus on is ISO. And I'll relate the other things, especially like how shutter would relate or how aperture would relate. Once you change your ISO from, say, 100 to 200, your aperture would go from 2.8 to 4.5 or whatever. The shutter speed would go from 1/60th of a second to 1/25th of a second. So I'll relate those things a little bit. ISO becomes very important when you're shooting in certain scenes. So you're trying to capture a certain image. You're really trying to get a particular shot. Okay? Where this really plays a big role first is the sports photography. A lot of people love sporting events, love to go take pictures of their kids, and oh, look, Johnny's got the ball, and there's running, and I'm shooting, and I look down, and I look at the preview of the shots, and they're all blurry. You see his face, and he's like, ooh, or whatever, and it's just like blurred right out. And so sporting events is really a place where ISO can make a big difference and not ruin your shots. Like I said before, ISO is a setting where a little goes a long way. Why? Because every time that you double your ISO number, you're letting in twice as much light, or you're being twice as sensitive to the light that's already there. So that's something to keep in mind, because you go up to like ISO 1600, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, or let's see, 100, 200 would be 1. 200 to 400 would be 2. 400 to 800 would be 3, and 800 to 1600 would be 4. So you four-folded how much light can come in, or how sensitive the sensor is to the current light that's in the scene. So that is one thing that can really happen, is that when you put that ISO setting too high, your pictures get really grainy. They get like spotty grainy, and you wonder what happened. You're like, oh wow, look how bad the shot looks. That's not how I remember it. Well, you're right. It wasn't like that. It got grainy because the higher the ISO, the more digital noise or film noise there is. So it might get grainy. It might get distorted. There might be a color shift. There might be lots of different things. So bringing it back to the sporting event. So you're shooting at ISO 100. You're at a sporting event. You got the light coming in from different angles to light the field, okay? And with that lighting the field, you're talking the high-powered lights are so far away from the subject that once the light comes down and hits the subject, it then has to go so far to get to you. So a lot of times light fall off at a stadium or at a sporting event, the human eye won't see necessarily a bad problem with it. You'd think, hey, I should be able to shoot that, no problem. But the camera might not be able to shoot it because the light falls off so much per foot. And as you could tell, the light's from way up on the poles at the stadium, coming down and hitting that person, and then coming back and hitting the image sensor inside the camera is quite a long distance. So light's going to fall off very quickly. So in a sporting event situation, you're trying to capture that that football player running down the field, and he's coming at you. You're up in the stands, you're ready to fire, and you're like, and you look and you're like, oh, it didn't work. What you could do is then try to go 2 settings up on your ISO. So if you're at 100, you would go to 200, then 400. So 400 would be a good place to start. If 100 is just a little blurry, if 100 is really blurry, you're going to want to probably go from 400 to 800 to get that extra fold of light, that extra sensitivity in order to get your shutter speed up. When you change your ISO in the situation of sporting events, the whole purpose of changing the ISO in a sporting event is to actually get your shutter speed up to where the pitcher is able to freeze the action. So you're watching that football player coming down the field, boom, 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 snap, 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 and now you're seeing him freeze. It's like, boom, there it is. There's another shot. There's Johnny's face. He's going for it. Yeah, touchdown. Woo, right? And that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to freeze the action. And that's really a good place where ISO comes into play, and it's a very good example of why we would up the ISO on a camera. So that being said, and working through that scenario, let's go on to another scene that would benefit from high ISO or changing the ISO a touch. Saying you're going to a music event, maybe a friend of yours is in a band, and you're going to go take pictures of the band. Pardon me. And you decide to go to this event, and the lighting is just not good enough. It's just not powerful enough. You as a human says, hey, it looks great. As a camera, it says, not so much. We really need something a little better, more light. We need more light, more light, more light, more light. This is where you can actually work with, instead of changing your shutter and your aperture and trying to get those settings quite right, you can actually bring the ISO and crank that baby up. A good example of that is the last band I shot. It was a dark wine bar, and it was there just was not enough light. There was some colored lights, which kind of was a challenge photographically. I almost said the other word. But it was really a challenge, mostly because you just couldn't get the camera to see the scene like you see the scene in your eyes. So what I ended up doing was shooting at 1600 ISO, very high. Yes, the pictures were a little grainy, but after I got done shooting, I took them into Photoshop and fixed them a little bit. So I at least was able to shoot these shots at 1/60th of a second, I think I got all the way up to 1/80th of a second, which froze the band action fairly good on stage, kept a lot of the light. So if there was red light hitting the person or blue light hitting the person, the background maybe had a yellow or a red. So you had all this different stuff going on from front to back, and you captured all the light, and it still captured it at 1/60th of a second. And it freezed the action, so it didn't look like it was a messy, poorly shot photo. So that's really where ISO comes into play, as well as in that type of scene. A lot of times people go out for night photography, depending on if you're shooting on a tripod or if you're not shooting on a tripod. If you're shooting on a tripod, you don't have to worry about ISO. You could leave the ISO at 100, put it on a tripod, shoot it for 2-3 seconds, and you don't have to worry about how clear it's going to be, because it's going to be clear. But saying you're out and it's getting dusk and you want to really get this picture of this church or building that you really see is just fantastic. Oh, I got to get a picture of this. You pull up and you fire and you're like, oh, wow, look, my shutter speed's like 1/3 of a second. Well, I can't handhold that. So let's up the ISO so we can get the shutter speed up where it needs to be. And that is another great example of where ISO comes into play. So back to the diagrams here. If you remember the original diagram about exposure, I started off on this with show number 1, and we talked about exposure. We're now on to ISO. ISO plays a 1/3 part in your exposure. It does set something, and it has a major effect, a direct effect on the other 2 settings, depending on what you're shooting and how you're shooting. So it really makes sense to learn what ISO is. And it also really makes a lot of sense to go read your camera book and figure out how your camera sets ISO. Good example, I read my book. Also, it's pretty obvious on this Canon G12. Whoops, right here. So that knob right there is what to set the ISO to. So if I want to set it at 100, I set it at 100. If I want to set it at 400, I set it at 400. I can change on the fly. A lot of other point and shoot cameras can't quite do it on the fly. So that's something to keep in mind, especially if you're out shooting and you want to make sure you get the shot. You're going to want to make sure that you know your camera and you preset for the scenes that you're going to be shooting. A lot of times you can save yourself a ton of heartache when you preset your camera because you're going to a night event, or you're going to a concert, or you're going to a sporting event. You can have everything all prepared, set the camera, walk out the door. When you get there, you're ready to shoot. You don't even have to think about it. It's boom, 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 and you're firing away. Another good thing to do is experiment with ISO. There are limitations. Some cameras like the G12, once you get past 800 ISO, everything turns grainy, which you'll see in the examples in Photoshop in a little bit. I went and shot 3 photos just for this show to perfectly depict the graininess that ISO happens to create when you crank up the ISO. Real quick, we're going to get into, I got 2 other diagrams real quick, and then we will get right in about 3-4 minutes, we'll get right into the Photoshop edits. So as you can see, there's this wonderful ISO triad. Keep that in mind when we're talking about these things. So right here's the first picture, okay? I shot this last night. Basically, it's on my kitchen counter. I have a bunch of mannequins here. I'll grab one for you so you can see it. Slide back over here. These little guys. They're mannequins that you can get for drawing. As a photographer, I find these mannequins fascinating because I can actually experiment with posing and settings all right here in the house or in the studio, and I never have to leave to go grab somebody and say, hey, listen, I really need you to come with me. I'm trying to do a photo shoot of this outside over there, blah, blah, blah. I can have these little mannequins and test out my lighting theories and see how my camera's going to work and play with my camera. And these are only like $9. I mean, total. I mean, they're posable. You can put their legs up. You can pose their hands. They're just like Star Wars figures, and they come off the stand. They can be on the stand. But they're great little tools for any artist, whether you're a photographer or a drawer or painter. It doesn't matter. Those are wonderful. I love these mannequins because they do give me an opportunity to, like I said, last night, sit here and take these shots and be ready to do this. So as you can see on the photos here, I'm going to look down and look at the photos. You're going to see on the left one, that was shot at ISO 100. Okay. Notice that it's fairly smooth. I mean, the arms are smooth. The background's fairly smooth. The lines are smooth. The lines are sharp where they need to be sharp. Nothing is dotty or grainy or really out of place. You look at the one on the right, that was shot at ISO 3200. Notice the arm. The arm is just like everybody says pixelated. I don't think it's pixelated. It's grainy. It's every other dot is a different shade of what light it saw. And that's called digital noise. That's what comes out of the camera when you crank up that ISO. And this is, like I said, this is a great example. I made the shot to be pretty close to the same exposure. As you can see, you know, the blues are about the same brightness. The blacks are about the same brightness. The wood is about the same brightness. The reason why I posed it basically laying down in a missionary position was basically because I had to put the camera on the table. I didn't pull my tripod out. I didn't want to. I was being lazy. I know. Okay, whatever. But, you know, it was a quick way that I could get a example to you on the noise. But if you look at the arms, you look at the head, you look at the background, you can see all this noise in the background. And we'll show you some more photos that show a lot of noise in the background there as well in just a minute. So let's get one more example up here. Now this is another good example of how ISO can help you get a different type of shot out of your camera. Okay, this is just me taking the camera. It's sitting in the same position as the mannequin shot, just I turned on a little bit more lights, and I took a measuring cup and I filled it with water and I poured the water into this glass. Now, the difference here is if you look at the right is ISO 100 at shutter speed, I think it was 1/8 of a second. You'll notice that it looks more painted on. It's not clear. The water is very, very blurry. You know, it's just not clear. So that gives us a sense of motion. If you crank the ISO up to freeze the action, okay, you then get the picture on the right. The picture on the right, basically, you can see the stream of water. You can see the reflection of the stream of water through the whole picture. You can see that there's a light. I'm trying to, let's see, about a third of the way down on that stream of water. You can see the blue light that I had shining from the right side of the photo. Everything is crisp. Every drop is crisp, and you can see it there. That stream is crisp. You can see the lines. So that's what it did, was it gave me the ability to pop that shutter speed right up from 1/8 of a second or 1/3 of a second. Got it right up there around, I think I got it around 1/60th of a second to capture that photo on the right. So that's really what gives you the ability. That ISO is really a powerful, powerful setting. And it can be used to adjust either setting, either shutter speed setting or aperture setting. I haven't really talked too much about how ISO relates to aperture, probably because I don't usually use it for that. Usually I use it for getting my shutter speed up there so that I can really get the shot that I'm looking for. I want to freeze the action. I want to get the whatever. But you can apply ISO so you can get a different aperture setting. Saying you're out in a nature walk and you see a wonderful, wonderful waterfall, but you want to freeze the water action, okay? You're going to want to pump that ISO up, keep your shutter speed right where it was at ISO 100, but then change the aperture so you can get that really deep depth of field. So maybe it was 1/60th of a second at, well, let's see, probably the aperture would be an f 4.6, you know, and the ISO was 100. You crank that ISO up to 800, you could take that aperture from f, you know, 3.6 and crank it right up to f11, and you'll probably get your shot with the same shutter speed. It'll be clean, crisp, and it'll actually give you a lot larger depth of field. So that's how you can influence depth of field and aperture with ISO. So we're at 7:23, so we got to get moving on photo edits here. I have a couple of different techniques to work with here. So the first one comes up here. This is one of the shots from last night. I cranked it right up to 3200 ISO. It got grainy. I brightened it up. It got even more grainy. So as you can see here, right here, we got a lot of grain in the ceiling. We got a lot of grain in the body. Everything's clean. I mean, it was focused right, but it just looks bad because everything is dotty. You got the counter here looks dotty. Even the counter here looks dotty and spotty. So what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take this into Photoshop, and we're going to try two different techniques. The first one we're going to try is a lab color correction to see if we can't get the dots to kind of shift away. And what I mean by shift, we're going to blur one channel or the other, and I'll explain lab color once we get in there. So let's get to Photoshop. As you can see, I got our dummy up here, and I'm popping in here. So let's zoom in real tight here and see the grain here. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the lab color adjustment on this one. So we're going to go to image and mode, and if you can't see it on screen, I'm going to mode, and then I'm coming over to lab color. Okay, it's going to probably, oh, it didn't give me a warning, but usually it gives you a warning. It says if you're going to go in this mode, when you switch back, it's going to not be right. Yeah, whatever. What lab color does is it separates out two color channels, so kind of like a orangish color and kind of a greenish color, and those are your two channels. And then you have a lightness channel. The lightness channel which let me pop over into channels. That'll explain it better. Notice we got a lab channel, which is everything. And then you have a lightness channel, which is your black and white or luminosity channel. That tells you how bright each pixel is. Then you have your color A channel. Notice it's kind of weird. You see a little bit of the grain and a little bit of the dots that we could probably play with. And then you got your color channel on the B channel. So again, all of them are black and white just to tell, okay, this color is this bright. This is what the luminosity is, so on and so forth. Now, what this technique really implies is that in this channels adjustment, what we can do is we can blur the channels and make them, I don't know, less grainy. So why don't we try that? We're going to go filter. We're going to go blur. We're going to do I think I'm going to do a Gaussian blur. I don't want to go too heavy. I'm already at radius 10. I'm going to bring it down to like a radius 3, 4, and just until the dots go away. As you can see up here, there's dots still in the background. I'm going to pull just a little further. Maybe 6.5 looks good. I like 6.5. 6.5 looks good. And we're going to hit OK. Then we're going to go grab the other channel. Notice we got dots all through here. Harder to see because it is grayscale, but there's a lot of grain to it. What we're going to do is do the same thing. We're going to go filter, and we're going to go down to blur, and we're going to do Gaussian blur. And I'm going to go a little less on this because this channel doesn't need it as much. We just want to get the dots to pop away. So let's go 5.5. We'll go a whole pixel radius down. Okay. So we hit OK. Now both color channels are now blurred out. As you can see here, you know, it's not as grainy as it was. Also not as sharp as it was. As long as in lab channel, as long as we're doing the lab correction, we're not messing with the lightness. A lot of times you can blur different pieces or modify color in the lab channel without ever affecting the actual sharpness. So why don't we see what we did with our lab channel? Maybe I'm totally wrong and we goofed it. Okay, not quite as good as I thought it would be. Mostly probably because the lightness channel also contains a lot of heavier grains, you know, lightness, darkness problems. So let's go look at lightness. As you can see here, this is probably one of the big problems as well. And what we can do is we can do the second part of this exercise per se is to take and median the lightness channels so we don't, or surface blur the lightness channel. So let's grab the filter. We'll do a surface blur instead of a Gaussian. So what we've done so far is the color blurring has gotten rid of some of the color shifting and the color noise. Now we got to get rid of the actual luminosity noise. So that's why this photo was such a great example of how to work with noise. So we're gonna grab a surface blur and we're gonna see what we can do here. And you know, we'll go on preview. Notice it's real grainy. We hit preview. Now it softens it up a touch. What we can do is really get funky with this. And we're going to lose a lot of detail, I think, by the end of the day. But we can start playing with this. What we can also do on the lightness channel, which is really funky and weird because I don't know too many photographers that really play with this channel too much, at least not in my circle. I'm sure there's a lot of photographers out there who do this. But you could take and pretty much do like a healing brush or paint a different luminosity onto this counter. So maybe you don't like this graininess. You can start painting the graininess out with a healing brush. You might still get the grain, but you might be able to correct some of it, like so. You don't like that at all? Let's just take and make it one solid color. That's pretty easy to do. Let's grab let's grab the color that it is on the bench here, and I should have it now. Yeah, let's go this color. Not so dark. All right, so now like I said, I'm going to really ruin this photo because I'm going to do this quick. But saying you want to make this all one type of luminosity, you can actually take and just draw this in here and get rid of that grain. Now we go back to lab. You'll notice that I really goofed that counter up, but we can always undo it. That's the beautiful thing about Photoshop. You can undo things. But by doing the several edits that we did here, As you can tell, we went from this picture, okay, as you can see, to now this picture. So the grain is softened up. Now the big thing about softening up the grain and the color, a lot of times the picture gets less contrasty. It also gets less sharp. So a lot of people want to do sharpening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into the image and I'm going to change the mode from from the lab color to back to RGB. So I get my 3 colors back. I am then going to do a quick sharpen. I'm going to do like a sharpen, unsharpen mask. And I'm going to set this accordingly. So I want to find my guy here. What do I want to sharpen? I'm going to play around here a little bit. I think I'm going to probably sharpen this right to 100% because I really want to get that sharpened up, but I don't want to get rid of the blur. So we sharpen it up a little bit. That got us a little bit more edge detail. I really want to get a little bit more contrast, so let's go grab some contrast. Let's go grab a curves adjustment, and we'll just take the default medium contrast drop down. And we now have more contrast, but I really want to get it a little lighter. So I can either do one of two things here. I can either get back down here and make another adjustment that'll bring it lighter, which I think is what I'm going to do. And we're going to lighten that bad boy up. And notice we're still pretty smooth until we really lighten stuff up. Now, one thing we can do is make sure the shadows stay in the shadows by darkening the shadows a little bit. At least the overall picture then lightens up. But the more we compress the shadows, because that's really where the grain tends to lurk mostly, is in the shadows, especially when you lighten up a picture or pull up, start pulling the lightness into a picture, just because you're trying to correct it, and it just kind of gets muddy and you get grainy and so on and so on with the whole light darken, bring it hotter, bring it colder. Oh, there's too much. Okay, now I'm going to fix it. And all of a sudden you start getting all these pixelated or grainy marks, and a lot of people can't recover from that. Sometimes you can't. Just go back to the original photo. Don't save your work. Go back to the original photo and start over. It's a great way to learn Photoshop and learn a different technique. So right there was the lab color technique, and I'll probably use that on another one coming up. But let's save this. So let's go File, Save As, just like we do every week. And we're going to change it as a JPEG, and we're going to put it back as image 1 new, okay, and okay. And we're going to go back up here. Here's the original photo. And like I said, a lot of grain here, a lot of grain in the body. You can't really see too much up here, but that's okay. But a lot of grain here in the countertop. Let's see how good I did. Smoothed it out quite a bit. You can see that this is now a lot smoother here in the black. This is a little smoother over here in the shadow. The body is a little smoother. I kept the lines. You can still see the edge detail of each of the body parts. And even up here got a little smoother. So let's clear it. We'll clear the whiteboard and we'll go back original. And we'll go, this is now the fixed. So subtle differences. Not as hefty as maybe some might like, but this is definitely a good way to work with noise. Switch into the lab channels and start playing with the color channels. Maybe blurring them out. Maybe doing some soft surface blur. Maybe lens blur. Great way to try to work with noise. So let's get on to photo 2. Here's Jakey again. This time he's decided to get up and sleep on our bed. So. What a great cat he is. One problem, though, is the room's not very well lit. As you can see, there's a light source coming from the right area here, camera right, and there's a lot of grain up here in the background because it's a solid color. A lot of times you'll see a lot of grain, especially if you turn up the ISO in the solid color area. You also get a little bit of grain in his body, but since he's a cat and he's furry, it's not that big of a deal. So this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take and I'm going to blur the whole picture. I'm not even going to switch it to lab color. I'm going to blur the whole picture. And all I'm going to do is I'm just going to mask back in the detail that I want. So I'm going to mask back in Mr. Jakey here. And I'm going to actually leave the blanket blurred because I think it might look a better shot. So let's go do that. So I'm going to clear the whiteboard. I'm going to pop over to Photoshop. Here I am in Photoshop. Let me grab the new picture. All right, here's Jakey. So, Notice in the background we got the grain here. It's not very flattering. It kind of distracts from the picture a little bit. Actually, this is just not a good picture of Jakey. He is cute though. But we're going to take it and we're going to blur the whole picture out, and then we're going to mask back in what we want to keep. So first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a copy of the background layer just by dragging it down here to the new layer icon. That gives me now a copy, an exact copy of the bottom layer, so the background, the original photo. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a filter against it, and I'm going to run the blur filter, and I'm going to Gaussian blur it. Sorry, I'm getting used to this mouse too, by the way. Just if I'm a little jerky, I'm sorry. For some reason, I go way too far, and I have to go back and grab the menu I want. So let's see. Is that going to take care of the grain? I don't know. I don't think so. It's not quite enough. How about we pump this up to 10? Let's really get it blurry. Now look at that. Now that really makes a difference. There's without, there's with. Yeah, that's going to soften everything right up. Real nice. Okay, great. So now, notice it's blurry. You're going to be like, oh, I can't stand looking at this. It's too blurry. You're right. It is too blurry. But let's make it more of a portraiture, of Jakey. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a layer mask in by clicking the layer mask button down here, if you can see me, my little arrow guy down here, lower right-hand corner of the screen, right next to the adjustment layer and the FX button is a little square with a circle in it. That is a layer mask, and the first layer mask is always a pixel-based layer mask. The second layer is, the second time you click it, is a vector mask. We'll get into those later on in the show. Right now, I don't have enough time, so let's get to editing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually make my black and white by clicking this there's a little black and white button right next to the color picker over here on the left. So black and white, and I'm going to make it black, and I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm going to do a pretty big brush right now because I'm really not caring about detail. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring back the detail for Jakey. So let's just get some general detail back in for Jakey here. Hi, Jakey, and he's coming back here like so, and we get some details, and it's kind of nice here. Now, if you can see it on screen, I don't know if you can, but I think you should be able to. You'll notice that, right by his foot here, the bed all of a sudden gets really sharp. That's because I'm doing a very quick job. So I'm going to show you how to quickly clean this up. We're going to shrink the brush, and we're going to switch to a white brush. So we change our colors down here. As you can see me clicking down here, I'm going to make sure it's white is in the foreground. I'm going to grab a brush, and I'm just going to kind of clean that up and make it blurry again, except for on Jakey. So as I outline the spot again, I'm going to let up on the mouse so I can get a undo point. And we're just going to clean this up nice and quick. And we're going to get in here underneath his chest. And we're going to go by the other paw. And we're going to come up. And we're going to come up by his ears. Be careful not to paint back into where you want it sharp. And we're going to go over his head here. Go over the ear again. Back down this way just a little bit, and then we're going to come across his back and his butt area and his tail. Oh, that's a cute little tail. I love my Jakey. And we're going to keep painting until we get this cleaned up pretty nice. So now, as you notice, I pretty much got Jakey nice and clean, and I'll zoom in. Jakey's nice and clean, but everything else kind of blurred off. So that's a neat way to take and get rid of the noise, because if you look up here, the noise pretty much is gone. It's just blurred in. It's just nothingness now. Now it's just solid color, or fairly solid color. And that's kind of a neat technique if you got a nice isolated subject. Jakey happens to be a really nice isolated subject in this picture. Something very simple to do is just to, like I said, blur them out and then work on them. Now, saying if we're ready to start doing real edits to this, I hate saying real edits. Every edit's a real edit, but saying we want to start doing some basic edits like lightness and darkness and start playing with that piece. Now what we can do is go Control-Alt-Shift-E in Photoshop. If you got Photoshop elements, you can do the same thing. It does make a clone stamped brush, or a stamped copy of all the layers below it. So now I have on top a final picture of Jakey. So now let's start playing with the edits that we want to play with. Let's do a levels Let's grab some levels here. Notice my histogram here, my graph. It shows that my highlights aren't hot enough, or maybe not hot enough, because the graph falls off way before it gets to the right side of the histogram. I'll be talking more and more about histogram in future shows. Right now, just know that on the left is your shadows, on your right is the highlights. And when you're using something like the levels command like this, you're adjusting it accordingly. So we're going to pull in from the right, and we're going to brighten up those highlights. Notice how they're getting brighter and brighter and brighter. So I'm going to figure out where I want to stop. So as you can tell, I like to go back and forth a little bit and see, I like it, I don't like it. You're right about there. All right, I also think that the whole picture needs a little brightness. So I'm going to grab the mid-tone slider, and I'm going to move it to the right, or left. Sorry, I can't tell my left from my right sometimes. We're going to go left and just bring it up just a touch. And what I want to do now is I want to bring the contrast back in, so I'm going to darken the picture up a little bit by pulling the left slider into the right. So I want it right about there. So there we go. I've now adjusted my exposure a little bit, my brightness and contrast. Looks good. Maybe I don't like the color saturation. Maybe I want to make it black and white. There is a filter in Photoshop. I wonder if I can get it to pop up where I want it here. Okay, there is one here that's called black and white. This is a powerful tool for doing black and white. It's a great way just to take sliders and adjust which color has a higher tone or a lighter tone, and which tones have a darker tone. So like saying, we know Jakey's orange, so if we make the reds a little lighter and the yellows a little lighter, because red and yellow make orange, we can lighten Jakey up quite a bit. If we want him darker, we can then darken those two colors, and we can make him look like a black cat, like a witch's cat. It doesn't look that good on Jakey. Jakey's definitely a light orange cat. You know, we could always adjust greens and blues if they're in there. There is green in the background. As you can see, as I play with the slider, the background starts coming up and down. And always remember, a little goes a long way. Doesn't matter whether we're talking about ISO or any type of adjustment. Very subtle adjustments go a long way. The more you play with these sliders and the further out to the left or right you get, the worse the picture is going to look. Like as you can see here, the background wall there just looks horrible because we've pumped the greens up to 300%, or however you want to look at it, a value of 300, and it's just pushed those colors and those pixels way too far. So that's something you want to keep an eye on. Subtle adjustments is the best way to go. So okay, I think we're going to be done with this one for right now. I like it. It looks good. It's kind of neat. Maybe I would crop it a little different, but let's call it done so we can move on to the third one. Oh, let's see. We're going to save as a JPEG, and we're going to go to, yeah, it's already there. Save. Okay. Replace. Okay. And we're going to come back into our video here. Here's the original Jakey. And here's our photo edited Jakey. Grain slightly taken out. You can kind of see that I brought a little bit of the grain back, but see how the grain here is very pixelated? What I ended up doing with this type of blur technique is I started banding. And what that means is that you'll see here, there's a band there. So there's a light and then a dark. You see another band here. You can correct that pretty easy by making a few other adjustments, and maybe not doing it as fast as I'm doing it. You could, you know, adjust these things a little bit lighter and not get those banding effects. But for the most part, the grain's kind of gone, except for the grain that's inside of Jakey. Jakey's nice and sharp. Original picture, you can see that Jakey's nice and sharp here. The now edited picture, it kind of gives it a dreamy kind of glow. The comforter is blurred out, but Jakey is nice and sharp there. So there we go. So okay, moving on to image 3. There's like 5 minutes left to do one more image. This is really not that hard of an image to work with. I decided to hang up one of my mannequins into one of the lights up in the kitchen. It was kind of a funny picture. I thought it was cute. It's like, hey, I'm hanging out here, you know. And it was such an easy picture to shoot, even at 3200. I shot this, I think it was 3200 ISO, but the shutter speed was up there around 200. So very, very fast shutter speed. Even with the fast shutter speed, you can see that I got a little bit of glow here from the lighting being too intense for the image sensor, and it bled over. But you can see up here in the ceiling as it comes off the gray or the white color and starts going to gray and then going back and blending into the darker color as it moves back, it gets a little more grainy, a little more grainy. You won't see too much grain in the body, but, you know, that's probably because it's well lit. And a lot of times if it's well lit, you won't see the grain. So there's a real simple photo edit. I'm just going to play around with the lab color again. I'm going to do the lab color adjustment real quick, demonstrate that one more time, and we're going to play around with, I think we'll do the lab. I think we'll just do the lab color adjustment. So going back into Photoshop, here's our mannequin guy hanging from the rafters. He is so cute. I love these mannequin guys. Go out and buy some. You got to go to Michael's, but hey, great store. You can find everything from painting supplies to things that you can photograph. So we're going to get in here and we're going to do this next edit. This is the lab color changing, kind of a grain removal technique, but we're going to change to lab color. So we go to Image, Mode, Lab Color. Now what this did was, it doesn't look much different here, just looking at the normal interface to Photoshop. We have to go under Channels to see the changes. So instead of being R, G, and B, you know, red, green, and blue channels, we now have a lightness channel. We have a color channel 1 and a color channel 2. Very easy to work with these color channels, and there's different techniques that you can do to these color channels. One of the techniques is to blur them out to take care of a little bit of the noise. So we're going to take and we're going to do a little bit of blur here. We're going to do, oh, I forgot. There is I always forget this. There is some, why don't we do that? Instead of the lab color thing, you saw that earlier on. Rewind the video, go take a look at that. That's a great technique. Why don't we just try to do the Photoshop, the actual Photoshop filter. So I'm going to go back to RGB color, so we're back to the way we were when we were first here. Let's go to Filter, and we're going to go to Noise, and we're going to go, we're going to go to Noise, and we're going to take and we're going to reduce noise. And this is such a simple, straightforward, slider-based kind of filter. As you can see, as we pull up here, I got to find where the colors change here. Where are we here? I'm not in the right spot. Yeah, I am. All right, so as we're coming down right there. So you can see there's a lot of noise here in this picture, boom, 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 and banding. This is actually showing me a preview of it. When I click on it, it shows me the original noise. Notice there's a lot of specks in it. Now we'll let go a little bit, and it's doing a little bit more noise reduction. What we can do is use these sliders. How strong do we want it? So you can literally just sit here and play with the numbers until you get exactly where you want to be. And it's so fun just to play with sliders until you get the right setting. I think I'm pretty close. I like there's the picture, noisy as it was. I let go and it'll show me a preview. Whack. Now it's kind of almost dreamy, you know. So let's do it. Boom. And as soon as it gets done processing here, done. There you go. File, save as. JPEG. Yes, I already saved it there. Yes. Okay. Great. La 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 la, and that's the last edit I'm going to be able to do tonight. So going back, and here is the original grainy. You can see the graininess here and graininess here, and you see it down here. Now we're going to flip over to the new one, and you can see that a lot of the grain is eased up, and you're still there a little bit, but you can still, it really did clean it up quite a bit, softened it up a little bit. Kind of hard to tell, but well, not really. You can see it right there. Right there, the grain right here. And we flip it over, and we notice that the grain softened up. So you get a little bit more of a soft painterly feel. So that's it. That's it. We're done for this week, I guess. Let's see. So let me flop back to here. So anyway, that's it for the Digital Babble this week. I hope you enjoyed the show. I know I'm doing things a lot really fast. I'm going to try to, you know, time it a little better next week so I can be in and out and off the air. But I'm on every Saturday. I'm on every Wednesday at 7 o'clock from 7 to 8, or roughly 7 to 7:45 or whatever. And I'm on fingerlakes1.com. You can also go check out the website, which will be coming, which is tdbny.com, and you can see all the photos. You can see all the edits and the techniques. I'm even going to be writing on there. Well, I really want you guys to send me in photos. If you got photos that you want photo edited or you want me to look at, send me in those photos. They don't have to be real big, but at least, get them into me. I won't use your name. I won't say who they're from. I'll just photo edit them and you can watch the show. It could just be a good, fun time. So anyway, I'm Flipper. This is the Digital Babble. I'm on every Wednesday. Come check us out and watch FingerLakes1.tv. I'm out of here. I'll see you on the flip side.
A Flipside Studio production. It's the Digital Babble. Tune in every Wednesday at 7 p.m. on FingerLakes1.com. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter.